Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome someone who I consider a friend, but he's also the executive director of the Chabad of Coral Springs, and even hosts his own podcast called Sunday Morning Torah Coffee. Please help me welcome Rabbi Avraham Friedman. Rabbi, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yes, it's my pleasure, and thank you.
Well, I want to say first, I want to start off by saying mazel tov to you. Your family just welcomed in a new grandchild, so big mazels there.
Yes, grandchildren are the best.
Yes, well, I don't know. I have time to wait for that.
I was just going to say, mazel tov to you. You just married off your daughter, and God willing, very soon grandchildren as well. So you'll know that deep satisfaction.
It doesn't have to be so whenever they're ready. But yes, but all right. So I have to say first, speaking of children, I have to say that I've interviewed a lot of people on this podcast. Without exaggeration, my kids might have been more excited when I told them that you were coming on than anyone else I've ever mentioned to them.
Okay, well, with God's help, we'll both have a great conversation over here.
Yes. All right. So we have a lot to cover, but I want to start by going back with you. Because while you're one of the friendliest and nicest people I know, I also know that I don't know a lot about you personally. So again, I told you beforehand, if anything's off limits, you can just say so and I'll edit it out. But let's start with this. So you were born in Brooklyn. I don't want to assume anything. So which part of Brooklyn are you from?
So I was born in Brooklyn. That is correct. I was born in at the time when I was born, I believe our family have already moved to Borough Park. There was a sort of mass exodus from Crown Heights, which was a huge center of Jewish life, post-war.
Right.
And I'll just say the neighborhood started to change, and many fled to other parts of Brooklyn, especially Borough Park. But nevertheless, I was born in Lefferts Medical, which was a hospital in Crown Heights. But I'm quite certain that at that point, my parents have already moved to Borough Park.
I've spoken to a lot of people in Chabad who grew up in Chabad, and I've spoken to people who became later on in life. But growing up, your family was always Chabad, right?
No, so it's a little bit more, I guess, detailed than that. And as I started to say, from Crown Heights to Borough Park, the Chabadniks or Lubavitchers, which is two descriptions of the same group today, stayed in Crown Heights. The Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, was adamant that we shouldn't be running away, and that we should maintain the shchuna, the neighborhood, and so on. For various reasons. Many of the non-Chabad Jewish families did leave Crown Heights. Now, my father, my biological father, is not from Chabad background. My biological father is more Czechoslovakia, Hungary. He was actually born in the city of Chust or Chist, which was Austria-Hungary, depending on the day. It constantly kept on changing, and he was a Holocaust survivor, and he was an observant Jew, a religious Jew, but he was not a Chabad Jew. He passed away at a very young age, and I was a very young child. I barely remember him. I only have one sort of beautiful story that became etched in my memory. And then 2 years later, 2 years after he passed away, my mom married into a Chabad family, Rabbi Wilshansky. I just turned 7 at the time, and he raised me as his own child. So, as I like to say, I merited to have two very special fathers. One, my biological father, who I heard wonderful things about him, and have one, as I mentioned, a beautiful memory. And let me shut off. I apologize. I want to shut off I'm getting beeps and so on, which you might hear on your end. Okay. So I grew up, I had a biological father, and he went through the Holocaust, and and as a result, until age 7, to answer your original question, I had and beyond, because I had many relatives. I definitely had the connection and exposure to the to other parts of the Jewish world, primarily the Hasidic world or
Okay.
Hungarian Jewry world, and then at age 7, married into a Chabad family, and moved to Crown Heights, and from there, carried on to the Chabad system.
You were always like Orthodox. Your family was always Orthodox before that, too.
Yes.
But you said you have one very special memory of your biological dad. Are you willing to talk about that, or you don't want to discuss
No,
that?
I could talk about it. I don't know if it's of interest to anybody else. I mean, but it happens to be that my father's yahrzeit, day of passing, is next week. So it's a good way to honor him. So my father developed lung cancer when I was about 3.5 years old, and was in the hospital in and out, which is why I have almost no memory and no memories of him. And incidentally, there are some who argue that that could also be a result of being in the camps and so on, because sometimes that horrific environment could affect your health, and cancer could come out a number of years later. But so there's only one memory that I have, which is that he once came home from the hospital. Maybe I was 4 years old at the time, and I was in the bedroom with my parents, and I was excited to see my dad. And I asked him to pick me up as a 3 or 4 year old, would do. And I remember my mother saying that he cannot pick you up because he's too weak, or in Yiddish, it's zu schwach, he's too weak. And he nevertheless bent down and picked me up. And and that's like the only memory that became etched in my mind. And it's pretty fascinating, or sort of impactful, in the sense that there was probably many other things that happened, but that stayed in my mind. Even as a young child, it had the impact. And it tells you that you never know what action and what act of love, dedication to your child will have that lasting memory, positive memory. So that's my one story.
And beautiful. And you always spoke Yiddish in the house. It was like always Yiddish growing up.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
when you,
I mean, I don't want to also mention the sort of the sad side of it, as that you never know what will be your last act of love and affection to your child. But that's sort of a little bit morbid or sad. I'd rather focus on the positive, that it could be one act of love that could have an impact on your child forever.
I think about that much, much more now, and I don't consider myself old by any means, but I do think of that much more. Like, what if this is like the last time? Let me be, nice in this thing, or let me do this. Like, I want them to have that helping them out in something, and I want to get emotional now, so I don't want to. So
right. So that's why I guess I would rather sort of frame it in a more positive way, that whether it's the last time or not, but definitely you don't know, even if you have 20 and 30 or 50 more years to live, and God willing you do, but you don't know the impact of the one act that you have an opportunity today. You don't know what that impact is.
And I think of my own dad certain times, like probably that he would never think of as special. I think of those moments too now again. So I just, when you were growing up, so what was family life like? I mean, your parents, your life in general, because in my mind, like the perception is like no movies, no TV, a lot of reading. So what was this life like in general for growing up?
So yeah, so there was a little bit of a difference in the bar, what I call the Borough Park world versus the Crown Heights world.
Okay.
In Borough Park, it's a more diverse community, meaning there are many different Hasidic groups. It's probably the largest religious community outside of Israel, would be my guess. And there was more more devout, I guess I would call it, and there would be a little bit more maybe modern Orthodox or similar. Growing up in Borough Park, my mother did very limited, but she did let us watch some TV. I do remember, some of the shows that we enjoyed as children, whether it was Popeye or, whoever growing up that time remembers those shows. It was very limited. It was, if we did our homework and stuff like that. Coming to Crown Heights, there was no TV in the home. The Rebbe was very quite forceful about the influences of TV and that it should not be in a Jewish home. So there was no TV. I cannot say that we never snuck to a friend and watched something here or there. But for the most part, yes, it was definitely more insulated. And also that then this is before the internet age and smartphone age and the personal device age. So for everybody, probably for the entire United States, in a sense, it was more a bit of a more pure life that we all grew up in.
Yeah, very much so. Try to explain to the kids now that, just a life without internet, it's like incomprehensible to them.
So we went outside after school, and in this way, we're probably the same. You played the ball on the steps. I forgot what that was called. Or you played with, you went to bike riding. You went, or you played with the bottle caps on the street. All these games had different names. I don't even remember. And that's what we did for hours after school. We did our homework, and we didn't have that much homework, at least as far as I remember. As younger children, just played. We played with friends. That is what we did. So that was that was beautiful. It was beautiful, and the influences of the outside world just did not exist. So if you're growing up in a Torah community, that was the values, that was the exposure, and that's what we had.
Did you do a lot of reading also?
I did reading. I actually like to read, but it was mostly, or predominantly, it was Jewish religious books. It was the Medrash. It was stories of our sages, stories of tzaddikim. I did when I got older. I got a little older. I developed a very strong interest in reading Holocaust books, again because of my dad, who was already deceased, and knowing that he went through the Holocaust. So I, with great interest, would sometimes spend into late hours of the night, would read books on the Holocaust and somewhat on Israel as well, but primarily on the Holocaust.
Well, I'm just curious on one thing now. Did your dad discuss a lot? Because I've talked to people who come from like Holocaust survivors, and some said that their parents discussed a lot with them. Some said that they didn't. They never talked about it. How was it in your home with that? From what you remember?
So I will say like this. My biological dad, as I said, passed away at a very young age. So I did not have an opportunity. I did not have an opportunity. I wish I would have, but that's not the way God wanted it. And my father was part of a fairly large family, both with the indirect siblings and cousins and grandparents. They all lived in like a courtyard, in like a housing complex, and they all lived together. And then almost all of them were tragically murdered by Germans or German collaborators. And so as a result, I had very few people who I could talk to about the family history. I did have an uncle, my father's only sibling that survived out of, I think they were either 7 or 8 siblings, again, as I mentioned, and cousins. So it was just my father and brother, maybe 3 first cousins that survived. So my uncle, this is like a really tragic story. And my uncle was very close with us. He loved us. Imagine, he lost all his siblings, older, younger parents, and the only one who survived was his brother. He and his brother, and then his brother dies at a very young age. So we were the children. His nephew. I was my own. I had 2 sisters and myself. So we were 2 sisters. He couldn't do enough for us. He treated us like his own children and couldn't do enough for us. And very sadly, he was murdered on the streets of Bensonhurst. He had like a little textile store, and he was murdered. He was stabbed to death on just a robbery. Stabbed to death on. The headline in the news was "Man survives Auschwitz." killed on the streets of New York or Brooklyn. I don't remember the exact wording. So I was 16 at the time. So I was a young adult and I could remember, but at that point I didn't really have the sense, the maturity to ask him about the family's history.
Right.
So I had a first cousin, one of his children, who he has become our information guru, for family information, but it's not the same. And
Right.
I did not have that opportunity, unfortunately.
Just also, did you?
But I know, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I do know that concept, because I've heard that from many of Holocaust survivors taking years before they would start talking about their experience. That is a known concept.
And some never did that. I've spoken to people the same thing, that they just never discussed it, and they had to find out, after the fact, after their parents passed, they had to dig and found out information that they were never aware of as kids.
Yeah.
So growing up, did you have much interaction with people who were not Chabad at all, or no?
You broke up a little bit. Say that again.
Did you have a lot of any interaction really with people who were not Chabad when you were growing up?
Because the answer is definitely on a couple of sort of directions. Number one, my first cousins, my aunt I had from my mother's side. My mother was born in Budapest. She was a year old when they ran away from Hungary and they made it up to Israel. So my mother had two sisters. She had a twin sister. They had children. We were also very close. So she lived in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is the sort of headquarters of the Satmar community and some other smaller communities. So I had first cousins that I grew up as children, very close on the Hasidic side in both directions. So I definitely had connections. I used to go there Shabbat. So I actually have a sort of affinity. I have an appreciation, because these people, when I was saying Kaddish for my father, I went to the synagogue. I was 5 years old. They helped me with Kaddish for the entire year. They were caring. They were supportive. It was. I have very special and fond memories, appreciation for all these families of various groups that were part of my life and were there to support us in a very sort of challenging time. So yes, that's from one end. And on the other hand, once becoming a Chabadnik, Chabad, as we know today, the Rebbe was, because of his deep commitment and love for every Jew anywhere in the world, the Rebbe encouraged us all to do outreach, and to every single Jewish child is equally a child of the Almighty, a child of the Jewish nation, and so on. So, every Friday I used to go, even as a kid, 8 years old, 9 years old, used to go on the mitzvah tanks, which I'm sure you've seen. We used to go to Manhattan, to Brighton Beach, to different parts of Brooklyn. Are you Jewish? Would you like to put on film? Do you like the Shabbat candles if it's a woman? And then we would talk, and so there was definitely that exposure. In fact, one of the main oppositions from some of the other Hasidic groups is that the Rebbe was exposing his young to outside influences. So there was an opposition to the Rebbe's push of opening up Chabad houses, of outreach work, and so on and so forth. So from both ends, there was definitely exposure. Later on, I was, as a yeshiva boy already, I was 20 years old. The Rebbe sent a group of 10 of us for 2 years straight to go to South Africa to be part of the Jewish community there and help out and so on, give classes, teach, run children's programs and so on.
You kind of anticipated my next question by this, and so I was going to ask now. For those who don't know, can you explain what Chabad is all about? And it is a lot of outreach. But can you explain, the basic, what the I guess the goal is?
What the goal is?
Well, not necessarily goal, but what the purpose is.
So there's more than one way to answer that question. The one way to answer is what the purpose of creation is all about, what the purpose of the Jewish people is all about, or are all about. when God created the world, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created the world, it says in verse number 2 or 3, it says V'ruach Elokim, the Spirit of God is floating over the water. Ruach Elokim merachefet al haaretz, al hamayim, on the water. And so the Medrash tells us V'ruach Elokim is this, the Ruach shel Mashiach, is the spirit of Mashiach. Mashiach is one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith, as Maimonides says, the belief in the coming of Mashiach. But it's not like this sort of scary, mystical concept, but it is basically the world as God would like it to be. A place where the prophets again and again say that the presence of Hashem, goodness over evil, will be very clear. We will recognize, like any animal always appreciates and recognizes a dog, as the prophet says, recognizes and appreciates the hand that feeds it, and so on. So to sort of encapsulate that is the spirit of Chabad, is to bring down, or the goal of Chabad is to bring the teachings of Torah, the teachings and the goal of Torah and creation of the world into fruition. How so? By bringing the teachings of Torah both to Jews and to Gentiles, each in what their purpose and mission is, in the most loving, kind, and friendly way.
Well, that's really what I've seen with Chabad. It's just some of the nicest and friendliest people that since always, and it's like a lot of Jewish outreach, to bring, I guess, into the fold a little bit in my view, I guess. But it's just very welcoming. So
right. So there is an objective here, meaning the objective, and it's not to be sort of deceiving, the kindness, or I often read and I say they don't get it. There's other Jewish groups, and I don't want to denigrate other Jewish groups. I will not name them, but there are other Jewish groups, and recently you see this more, that are asking, okay, what is the key to Chabad's success? And somewhat they don't get it. And the reason why I don't get it, they usually come up with the fact, okay, Chabad is very friendly, which is true. Chabad will invite you to a Shabbat meal, which is true. All that is true, but there is a core point that they're missing, is that Torah was given to God by Moses, and Torah is the ultimate objective truth. And therefore, the success of Chabad is that we're not diluting, we're not distorting the truth of Torah. We are telling you the truth of Torah in an appealing and friendly and menschlich way. You have to be a mensch. I saw yesterday a good friend of mine, Rabbi Paltil, was answering questions of what you should look in a spouse, who you should marry, and he says, you don't have to look for a Hasidic guy, meaning a guy who's very pious. You don't have to look for some holy roller. You have to look for someone who's a mensch. So being a mensch, being somebody who could treat another human being with the proper dignity and respect, is part of Torah. It's a cardinal principle in Torah. So it's a package. It's a package deal of true, traditional, authentic Torah, as passed down from Moses throughout history, throughout the generations, sort of illuminated with the deeper insight that Chabad and Hasidut, which is a discussion on its own right, sort of imbued. Torah gave it a soul, gave it a deeper appreciation and meaning, in a way that is understandable, pleasant, and so on.
Okay, I have to ask also now, what prompted you to move? Because you were from Brooklyn. What prompted you to move to Florida, Coral Springs, Florida?
I heard, Jonathan, that you're living here, and therefore I decided I gotta come.
Before me. So.
Was I here before you? I don't remember.
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure, but so there's a system called shlichut.
Okay.
Or shlichus in the Ashkenazic version, and that term has been also adopted by others, and it's a wonderful term, which means you're an emissary. In this case, an emissary of the Rebbe's mission purpose to reach to every single Jew and beyond. So, so I already as a yeshiva boy growing up, very much wanted to be part of that tremendous merit, and so I was raised and verbringed is the word, where we sat with friends and with mentors. That was the yearning for us to have the merit to be part of that meaningful purpose in life. So Florida became, there were various options, but without going through all the details, I ended up here in Florida. So that's the story. This was before Florida. This was before Florida is Florida. I mean, when I came here, I'm not going to say there were no Jews in Florida. There were always Jews in Florida, but primarily the Jewish community concentrated mostly around the Miami Beach and North Miami. But this area, North Broward, my brother-in-law, Rabbi Denberg, was here. He established the Chabad community here in Coral Springs. And I came here as the community started to grow to be part of his great work. So that's how that ended up being. But in order to do so, we would write into the Rebbe. And it used to be in the earlier days of Shlichus, like in the 1960s, where the Rebbe would actually call you in, any of his disciples or Hasidim, followers, and would say, would you like to go? We have a place that asked, or we're thinking about sending a shaliach here, a rabbi to this and this place, and would you like to go? But for one or two reasons that changed, and it would work the other way around. You would look into a place that you thought was somewhere that you could contribute, and you would write in for a blessing. And if you received the blessing, then you became a shaliach of the Rebbe, which is the highest joy and merit one can experience in the Chabad world. And that's what happened. I wrote it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said that I need to have Rabbi Korf, of blessed memory, just passed away about 2 months ago. He was what we call usually the first shliach to a state, became the head of state, and any other shliach that would want to move, just giving you a little bit, Chabad structure, anybody who wants to move to the state would get his approval as per the Rebbe's instructions. And also the Rebbe would always first say, if your wife is on board, if you have your wife's consent and blessings and so on. So that's how I ended up in Florida.
Well, that's what I was about to ask, because I was about to ask if there's thought put into where a Chabad is going to open, because it's almost comical in a great way, because I've seen like documentaries even on Chabad's opening, like in these remote places in Australia or New Zealand. So is there some thought put into like, hey, let's open a place here?
Yeah, there is. It does depend on whether the local community, because basically in 99, probably 0.9% of the cases, the Chabad house, the Bet Chabad, is supported by the local organization. It might receive funds like in the first year from headquarters, but after that, you are totally on your own. So there's always that assessment that there is a potential. And when I say potential, it's not like, okay, you have $1 million in the bank. Chabad rabbis come out to a place and they really work hard to develop, to develop from a seed into a sort of a blossoming tree, and Bet Chabad house. So, but there has to be that potential. That's usually one of the things that is being looked for. Sometimes it's because a community reaches out to Chabad and says, we have already an established community, but we need a rabbi. Other times, if the area does not have that sort of core community, so Chabad will send out yeshiva boys from time to time to those areas to bring them Yiddishkeit, to bring them and connect them to their Jewish roots. Sometimes a shliach who is established even an hour away. I mean, I give you my own experience when I was in South Africa. So we were mainly stationed in Johannesburg, but we also went down to Cape Town, which is all the way on the south. Now in Cape Town itself is an established Chabad, but if you drive 2 or 3 hours from Cape Town. Now, today, the whole situation has changed just based on the political dynamics. But at that time, there was 2 to 3 hours probably outside of Cape Town in the whole Cape province. There were farmers, Jewish farmers that lived an hour away from each other. So we as yeshiva boys spent a couple of weeks traveling from each of these farms, and we bought Jewish books. And when we put on tefillin and Shabbat candles and just sat and schmoozed and spoke and just tried to tell them how special and valuable they are to the Jewish people. So that was a very meaningful experience for us. It was my friend and I. And hopefully we made a good impact, a holy impact on the people we were visiting. I mean, and there are many stories of the sort of continued where sometimes as a result of that, they would send their kids off to Jewish school, Jewish education, so that they weren't lost to the Jewish people.
What a great experience that was for you also. I mean, really. So if Chabad opens
I will say, Jonathan, happens
Yes.
to be that my kids know this, I also love wildlife and nature. So I had that side benefit as I'm driving through the countryside.
Fantastic, though. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but if Chabad decides to open a location, so is there a lot of thought also into who will run it? Because I'm going to say this, and this is no way lying because you're on, but you are genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. So I mean, and almost everyone who I've encountered, like I said, in Chabad, who's affiliated with Chabad, has been fantastic. So, but I'm sure that has to be taken into account to put someone affable as the face of an organization in a place. So, so is there a decision made? Let's put Avraham here because he's great with people, or we can't put Mendel because he's so too quiet and too introverted. So is there a thought process behind that?
So what now, because Chabad is, I mean, in the earlier years of Chabad's, reaching out and establishing centers, the system might have been different than today, and I could address that if you want me to. But today, it usually is always that the prospective shaliach or rabbi is interviewed by someone who's a little bit higher up in the organization. And there could be more than one person who's interviewed, and for various reasons, the higher up rabbi who is somehow in the area, who's responsible for that district or so on, will interview and make that decision. If you are the right person for the right job. Because also remember today, Chabad rabbis are not only there's a difference in geography, there's also a difference in responsibilities and who he's a rabbi to, whether it's seniors, whether it's a community rabbi, whether it's a campus rabbi, whether it's an education rabbi in a school. So all that needs to be assessed when a rabbi is appointed. So that's that. For one of the most important things that are looked for is dedication, genuine dedication, and in 98% of the time, not that I take a survey of all the Chabad rabbis, but just my observation that in the overwhelming, whatever the exact numbers are, that dedication is there, and that is totally based on the Rebbe's inspiration, meaning every Chabad rabbi goes out and says, okay, I am representing the Rebbe. Therefore, he's very familiar, more than just familiar, he has studied the Rebbe's teachings in so many areas of Torah and its underlying sort of foundation of the truth of Torah and the truth of one's neshama, one's soul, and the eternity of the Jewish people. So all that is so deeply sort of imbued and embedded within the Chabad rabbi and within every one of our people. The difference is just that, it has to be brought out to the open. Sometimes it's lying a little dormant. So that is the motivator until today. That's the sort of the fire that keeps us on our toes.
I want to run to a couple of more present day things. I want to talk first. I want to talk about. Let's talk first about October 7th. So it happened on Shabbat. It also happened on the holiday. So how did you first find out about it and your reaction right off?
That's of course a painful, very painful part of our Jewish experience that's going on until now, until this very moment. Everybody has an opinion about that. What do they say? Whether it's true or not, I was told that after I think the Yom Kippur War, when Golda Meir came to visit Nixon, and Golda Meir and Nixon says to Golda Meir, you're only a prime minister over 3 million people, and you look like you're like you look so, like, as Jackie Mason would say, so fachmuret, and so you look so drained and so on. And I have a country of whatever was the time at that time was maybe 250 or 300 million people, and I look healthier than you. So she supposedly responded and says, you don't understand. You are a president over 300 million citizens. I am a president or a prime minister over 3 million prime ministers, because as you know, every member of our people has the best answer to how you're supposed to govern. So we all have opinions of what should happen in Israel, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. But to answer your original question, how I found out, so it was on Simchas Torah, the happiest day of the year, and we were in shul over here, we were in the synagogue, and a fellow who is not a usual, what we call, or a regular at the synagogue, shows up like for Yisker, and he came in and he was crying. Now, sometimes people cry for Yisker, but we didn't even start saying Yisker. And he continued to tell us, because we on the holiday, we don't watch the news, we don't listen to the radio or websites or internet and so on. But he came in crying, and he told us at that point nobody even knew the extent of the horror, but he told us this was sort of as things were developing. And I remember, this is somewhat a little cute but sad. I remember walking into, we have, thank God, a larger community, so we have different minyanim, different minyans going on at the same time. And I walked into a different minyan, and a fellow over there who has a child living in Israel says to me that he heard from his child, and his child, I'm not saying names, is not necessarily the fittest, a little overweight and so on and so forth. And he says to me, he says, if they called up my son in reserves, things must be serious. So, because he's not necessarily, your model, your model soldier, but it was, as the rest of all of us, we were highly concerned and devastated.
I've seen you talk about this on your podcast, which I'll get to in a moment. Yeah. But in your opinion, what can be done to combat the incredible amount of anti-Semitism going on now, as well as the disinformation and propaganda?
So, I will try to, I will try to give the opinion that is based on what I believe is the proper sort of Torah response. Because opinions are worth exactly that. We all have an opinion. Take it, throw it in the garbage. I mean, we all take our opinions so seriously, but it's your opinion. We live in a household. How often do you tell your spouse your opinion? And okay, fine, I'm very happy, happy for you. Go take out the garbage. You know what I mean? So it's all opinions. But the rise of anti-Semitism is on the one hand alarming. It definitely is alarming. On the other hand, it's interesting that the Medrash talks about, the first time we find anti-Semitism on a explicit sort of very, very, the center of the whole story, you could say, is in two situations. Purim, of course, with Haman, who wanted to annihilate the Jewish people just because they weren't a threat to him, but in fact, they were a benefit to the kingdom. and as Esther makes the argument in the Megillah. But then you find even earlier when the Jews were in Egypt, as the Torah opens up in Exodus, where Vayikutum b'nei Yisrael, the Jews just became disgusting. The Egyptians became disgusted by the Jewish people. Now, you could make the argument there that if you read just the basic Torah narrative, that they might have felt threatened by the Jewish people, as the Torah says that one day they will overtake us. And even though Joseph and the Jewish people contributed and made Egypt into its superpower, but nevertheless, part of the Jewish experience is that anti-Semitism, hatred. But so on the one hand, it's alarming, and we need to do whatever we can to combat it and to shine a light on it. On the other hand, history has also taught us, based on what Torah tells us, Hein am levoda yishkain, u'bagoyim lo yitchashav. This is a nation that dwells alone and does not take into account what the nations of the world say. So we have a deep belief and knowledge and experience that we are Hashem's people. We have His protection. We need to do what we need to do to defend ourselves, and the rest will fall into place. Of course, we pray that it should be with as little pain and with as little death and injury as possible. But we have to have that confidence and knowledge that we are in the right. And the Holy Land is ours, and we need to defend ourselves.
You had something on your recent podcast, the one about counseling someone at the airport, and I was going to ask you about that because, whenever I post an episode of this podcast, for one, it doesn't matter whether it's someone from Israel or something. Just because it says Jewish in there, I get trolls on there, commenting, and so you're more visibly Jewish than I'm very Jewish-minded. You're more visibly Jewish than us. So how do you deal with that? Like, you had something at the airport, doing something like that. When you encounter it directly, what is your response to that?
So, I don't know if you want me to repeat the story briefly, but it was somewhat. I wouldn't say that I wasn't slightly uncomfortable, and I'll explain why. But at the same time, it was somewhat entertaining because I had, as probably everyone who's going to be listening to this interview or podcast, at some point, and probably more than once, you've had airline delays or cancellations and so on. So I had one of those experiences. I was coming back from Israel. We had a stopover in Milan. And there was an incident there, and our flight was rescheduled for the next day. But we were waiting in the airport for quite a number of hours. I sat down, and some older fellow, I will surmise he was probably in his low 80s, starts talking to me. I didn't think it was Italian. I mean, I'm in Milan, and I didn't think it was Arabic because even though I don't understand neither of those languages, but I could tell the dialect and the what language it is. But I guess it was closer to Arabic, to Italian. And he's asking me, the one thing that I did understand is, you're Israeli. And that's all he kept on saying, Israeli. So I said to him, I'm not Israeli. I love Israel, but I'm a Jew from the United States. And he was sort of a little frustrated, didn't understand. So I took out my phone, Google Translate. I typed in the word Jewish and came up with the word Hebreo, like Hebrew. And I showed it to him. His child was sitting next to him. Child, meaning was probably in his 40s, was sitting next to him on the other side. And, he's trying to engage. And I'm sort of saying that I don't understand. So finally, he blurts out, the two words. And he says to me, like Netanyahu. So I said yes. I knew exactly based on the tone and the sort of the, I would say, sort of venom that question came with. I said yes. So he used some expletives, which I'm not going to repeat, and babbled off a couple of words, and then all I said back to him was, like Sinwar. That was my question to him. And he, again, emotionally doesn't want to talk to me. And, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds later, got up and left. And to me, on the one hand, it's somewhat uncomfortable because of, as you're saying, the rise of anti-Semitism. If he would have gotten, more aggressive, I don't know what the local police, would have done based on just some of the stories you hear out there of, a Jew has become a little, uh, has to be, is not always defended. I'll just leave it at that. So, yeah, maybe it was a little uncomfortable, but on the other hand, I was sort of amused, and I felt bad for him, and I felt bad for the country. That ultimately, and it's not even ultimately, we're seeing this. The ones who are more hurt, yes, anti-Semitism is directed towards us, but the Western societies that have allowed this kind of hate and cancer within them um, are being affected and destroyed far from within, far worse. So this was the crux of the conversation, like Netanyahu, like Sinwar, and this wasn't a political like Netanyahu. Netanyahu here as the representative of Israel. I'm not now going into whether Bibi is a good head of prime minister or not. That's a political discussion. It's a whole different discussion. This was just what to him Netanyahu represented, and to me it was what Sinwar represented.
So let's plug your podcast because I've watched many of them. Sunday Morning Torah and Coffee. I said I've watched many episodes already. I find it comforting because I like hearing you speak. But you have a warm presence when doing it. So what made you decide to start doing this?
I don't, I'm going to guess maybe it's 10 years ago that I just decided, as many, that was when it was all sort of developing, that you at that point everybody started to do either Facebook, social media, podcasts, whatever it is, where you could reach an audience that's not going to get out of their home, not going to, you have even a successful class or lecture here at Chabad. If you get 20 people, if you get 40 people, 50 people, that's amazing. And it is amazing because there's something about showing up in person. But in a podcast, and people could share, and people don't get out of their home, and they could be in the comfort of whatever clothing they're wearing and in their house. You could reach many more people with the sort of wisdom and truth of Torah and its message. And I hope and I pray that I'm able to do that. Doesn't mean that I'm always correct in my understanding and interpretation, but we try our best to do so.
How far in advance?
And I have gotten I've gotten much feedback, positive feedback, and that's been very satisfying to me and very meaningful. It's very meaningful. People that I am surprised, and they tell me, Rabbi, I've listened. I don't know if they listen to every class or they listen to the entire class, but every so often they tune in and spreading the light of Torah and the power of Torah, which is, the Rebbe would always tell us, one candle, ma'at or, based on the statement of our sages, ma'at or docha harbe choshech, a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness, and Torah is referred to as Torah or, Torah of light.
Like I said there, you do have a very warm presence when doing it. I enjoy watching them. So just curious,
I think I got that from my father of blessed memory. So that's what they tell me. So
how often
thank you.
How do you determine what to cover each episode? How far in advance goes into your decision what you're going to talk about each day? Like, is that something comes up on the news, current events? Let's talk about
that. So that depends. It's basically always connected to the parsha. Once in a while, I will do a Jewish concept and a Jewish idea, especially if someone reaches out and says, "Could you talk about this?" But it's usually always related to the parsha, and often I will try to relate it to current events, especially if it's an important event as it pertains or affects the Jewish world. So I will definitely try to connect that, as Torah is from means to teach, and it means a guide. The word Torah is related to the word moreh, hora'ah, which means a guide, a teaching for us in our day-to-day life, including today. I was just you say you heard this past podcast. We spoke about shoftim v'shotrim, to have honest judges, and then you should pursue justice. I mean, how relevant is that today in societies? Today, every ruling you have to know who appointed the judge. Why is that necessary? A judge should be totally true to justice and to truth and so on.
Not that way. So I'm just curious. Do you have a favorite holiday?
I have a favorite holiday. Some might argue it's the first day kids go back to school, right? That's relevant. But basically, my kids are grown up. I have one. My youngest daughter now is just started today, actually, her school in Israel. She went for a year in seminary. She graduated high school last year, and she went for a year in Israel. So that's really wonderful, and I know she'll have a fantastic experience. But what is my favorite holiday? I'll admit a truth that maybe I shouldn't be saying here on a podcast. Being a Chabad rabbi, some people know this, but many don't. A Chabad rabbi is not your sort of typical rabbi in the sense that you prepare a little speech and the responsibilities are limited. And this is not to put a knock on other rabbis. There are many very hardworking rabbis, but Chabad rabbi's job encompasses a much broader area of responsibilities, including when it comes to a holiday. There's many responsibilities, and as a result, there's a certain human natural stress that comes with it. So, holidays, while wonderful and family and so on, it definitely also has a stress element. So that's just a little of an admission as a general introduction. So, the holidays, which would be, I would almost rather go back to my childhood and say, okay, which of the holidays were one of the favorites? So Purim was definitely one of the favorites, no question about that. It was just that joyous and and community atmosphere, especially growing up in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, and the streets were filled. And thank God we've developed that here in Coral Springs as well, and all the meaning behind Purim and the lessons and the learning and the commentaries on the Megillah, that all makes for a very meaningful and beautiful holiday. Passover, definitely has a certain stressful side to it on personal level, sort of family, and because of all the preparations. I don't think there's any Jewish home that doesn't experience that, but there's also a tremendous amount of meaning. Probably the somewhat the easiest of the holidays is the holidays of Shavuot. So I don't know if I have a favorite. That's the truth. I don't know if I have a favorite. They're each meaningful and special, and a wonderful experience with community, with family, they're all special.
Well, so people know, how can they find the podcast and follow you on social media?
So, you type in, my class is live on Facebook, but then I share it, I upload it, both also on YouTube, and I send it out via WhatsApp and via Twitter, LinkedIn, on my WhatsApp status, which is in general, I would say it's an entertaining. If you want to know about Israel, about Chabad, you might want to follow my WhatsApp status. There's interesting things there. There's certain things that I will not post on Facebook for various reasons that you might find on my WhatsApp status. But so it's live on Facebook. It's usually around 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings, Sunday Torah and Coffee. It's Rabbi Avraham as one word, because Facebook, at least when I signed up the account, only allowed sort of two words in the. So Rabbi Avraham is one word, and Friedman is a separate word. So that's that. And then I upload it to YouTube. You type in Avraham Friedman, I'm sure I'll come up. And you could watch both the Facebook and YouTube at any time. It doesn't have to be 11 o'clock Sunday morning. You can watch it anytime throughout the week, and people do. So
I'm usually throughout the week type instead of the 11 o'clock Sunday morning. But yes, I enjoy the episodes. Rabbi, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I want to take up more of your time. I can talk to you for hours because I have so many things to ask, but I really thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. And I love getting to know you more than I have in all the years that I've known you already. But very kind. And I recommend everyone follow along on your social media to the Torah and Coffee, Sunday Morning Torah and Coffee.
Well, likewise, I really do appreciate it for the opportunity to share, good and positive thoughts. And I part of the reason, I hope it's okay. Part of the reason why I could do this is because I have a very special right hand that works at Chabad. We both know her very well. She just made a simcha as well. My office manager over here, Suzanne, your sister, and she is truly incredible. So I want to take this opportunity on her brother's podcast to give her a shout out, because she really does deserve it. She's incredibly devoted and dedicated and so on. So thank you for that.
That's one of the things that I'm going to edit out of the episode.
As far as I know, you like her as well. What's going on with you? Now that I know that you listen to my, I knew this before, but now that I see that you are a regular listener to my podcast,
I am a regular listener. Yes.
I have to make sure to behave a little more.
I always say that. It reminds me, because I post a lot of funny things, sometimes silly things on Facebook, and every once in a while you press like or something, and it reminds me, oh, my rabbi's watching. I should be careful. Yeah. When I post on, it reminds me of that. So. Well,
I don't think I've ever rebuked you, so you're doing good.
No, it's fine. But Rabbi, thank you again. So again, I'll sign this off. This has been the Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and again, a very special thanks to Rabbi Avraham Friedman. Like, comment, bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.